have to.
It's funny that talking about this stuff all day. It's probably the first time I've seen SQL query. Talk about this stuff all day. Cool. Don't think I've ever really looked at it. I know how to talk about it.
It's all that matters. You just place the people that.
Yeah. It's all about IT, but I couldn't actually do a single thing in it. Wouldn't even know where to go to find
to be
something.
interactive?
You know.
Sure. You're not running interactively that way, right?
Did you move here from out of state?
I did. I
which
was born in California, but grew up in Illinois. I came out to go to college at Arizona State and just stayed after.
Oh, where in Illinois?
Wilmington, Illinois?
Okay.
Yeah, it's middle of the state. It's
Okay.
State Farm,
Or after
State
we're
University.
done with it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Champaign.
No, Champagne's close to us. It's about 45 minutes from my hometown.
It's a fun place.
Yeah, it's fun. Got a lot of friends that went to that.
Sure.
You have friends?
Well, imaginary, but we're on the dean's list.
You know, I'm kidding.
Am I up?
Yep, you're up.
Alright, which one's recording? Is that one? Hi guys, I'm Brad with Tech Systems, and we do sponsor this PowerShell user group. So essentially what we do is Tech Systems is the leading IT services provider. So we're trying to find you your jobs, and it doesn't have to be local here to Phoenix. We're all over the country. If you guys want to reach me, my direct phone number is 309-838-8119, or if you just want to get updated on the market. Thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Anytime.
Thanks for the pizza.
Yeah, I'm going to grab one more piece before I
give
go.
my spiel today.
Oh, you got a spiel.
Well, go
Honestly,
ahead.
you don't look like you can eat that much. That was like 4 pieces in like 10 minutes.
Right? Oh, man.
That's great.
I ended up working through lunch, so I was like, you know what, I haven't eaten, I'm gonna wait till PowerShell. Thanks guys.
Thanks.
Yeah, I won't see you again, but thank you guys. If you need anything, Karen's just right around that door, okay?
Okay, Brad. Thanks, Brad. Okay, so today we have Drew Mora from GCU, right?
GCE at technically.
GCE, okay.
Yeah.
What's the E?
So GCU is a university, and the IT services that are provided to that university have split off from the university, and now they're their own entity known as Grand Canyon Education. So we'll be providing IT and platform services for a lot of different higher education facilities, not just GCU any longer.
Oh, wow. Well,
Yeah.
you're going to show us what you did with PowerShell for SQL clustering, right?
Right, so yeah, so just to give you an overview, we inherited, and we probably will with some of the other higher education companies that we take on, a bit of technical debt. One of those things is what's known as an FCI, a failover clustered instance. See if we can just show what that is real quick. So I'll just do this very, very quickly, but for those who aren't aware, basically what this is 2 Windows servers with shared storage. And each server is known as a node, and so you can see there are 2 completely different physical nodes with shared storage, and the roles are installed on the shared storage. So these are basically SQL instances that live on drive letters, and the reason you don't see them on this particular node is because it's not the owner of these groups. But if it were, you would see all of the different drives that are in the resource group here. So the SQL Server installation and the data and index files and log files are all contained on these various drives that are shared storage between the 2 physical servers.
Who controls the locking to the files?
Windows does.
Really?
Yeah, and so that's a very interesting concept. I know in the Linux world it's not as big of a deal, but in the Windows world it's a really big deal, which is why you have a very hard time creating these types of installation on VMware. So if this were an ESX host, you would have to do a bunch of ESX magic to allow the VMDK files to be shared between the 2 Windows nodes.
Wow.
Yeah. And it used to be back in the day when you built these things, you couldn't actually plug the fiber channel cables into the back of the server until you'd installed failover cluster services to allow the shared disk and locking to be shared between the 2 nodes.
Well, a file lock in general on Windows is hard to.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get at.
Yeah, Windows is fun like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what tends to happen is with our massive physical infrastructure and some of the other physical infrastructure that we're inheriting from these acquisitions and things like that, we still have to patch, well, we don't, but the NOC, the Network Operations Center, will still have to patch these Windows nodes individually. And when they go through their patching cycle and reboot them, what will happen is the failover cluster, the SQL instances, you'll have two of them running on the same physical server. So each SQL instance can run autonomously on any of the 2 or 3 physical servers in the cluster. And the optimum thing that you want is each SQL instance running on its own physical node to have all of the consume all of the resources of that physical node. So if I had 2 SQL instances that were configured for, say, 128 gigs of RAM, and there was only 140 gigs of RAM in each physical node, if they were both running on the same physical node, I would get resource contention. So our Network Operations Center will patch and just reboot at will, and we found that we were getting calls every Monday morning or every time after a patch window stating that the SQL server is slow, the database is slow, etc. So we were trying to figure out what was going on, and we found out that when they were patching things, they weren't moving the cluster groups from having 2 on one physical node to having 1 on each physical node. So what we call an imbalanced cluster, because a balanced cluster would be 1 SQL instance on one Windows node, the second SQL instance on the second Windows node. So each Windows node is running 1 SQL instance. We call that a balanced cluster. An imbalanced cluster, as we call it, is 2 of these instances, these virtual instances, running on 1 physical server. So
each of those instances are duplicate of each other?
No, they're different. Yep.
Okay.
So we can just, for this conversation, say SQL 1 and SQL 2. So actually, let me just real quickly, if you don't mind.
Good question. I was going to ask the same thing.
Let me just, this is going to be fun. Let me see if I can draw it out. So basically what happens is we have a server. This would be a physical server.
And there's squares up there in that box.
What's up?
There's
Oh, you
shapes
do?
up there. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. I'll do that. Thanks, Tom.
No problem, man. That makes it a little easier, I hope.
You know what? Yeah. Let me just start a new file and take your advice. Hold on one second. File, new. Don't save. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not great at MS Paint, as you can see. Perfect. Okay, great. And then can I just? Oh, I can't copy and paste. That's okay. Okay. Now am I going to be able to quickly, oh, perfect. Yeah, so server 1, physical server 1, physical server 2. These are physical, let's just say, I don't know, what's some of the cool servers these days? A Dell R610, I don't know, or R610 still around?
Sure.
Sure, so we'll say each of these is a Dell R610. Then I'll just do 610 here. So these are physical devices. What you would need to do is either configure some sort of fiber channel fabric or direct connect a storage unit to both of these physical devices. So let's just say it's one storage unit direct connected to both physical devices. So there's a controller or some sort of host bus adapter and a controller on this physical device, and you're going to have each path connected to each controller. And then underneath there, you're going to have your shelf of disks, your tray of disks, and it is shared between these 2 physical hosts. So when you run the SQL installation for, say, SQL 1, you'll create what's known as a virtual instance of SQL Server. And this is supposed to be a database icon. I didn't see one up there. So we'll say that's SQL 1. And those data and log files will live on these shared LUNs on this shared storage. So it might live here. This might live here. Line. Let's see if there's a line. Straight line. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so then this would be some other shared storage that hasn't been allocated. And let's say I run the SQL installation again, and I create another virtual instance called SQL2. That's bad drawing. So we'll say yes.
And again, SQL 1 and SQL 2 are not redundancies. There's two separate databases.
They are two separate SQL instances with many separate databases. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
So SQL 2's data might live, I'll just use X's, on these LUNs, which are shared. Now, if this host goes down, this particular host will take ownership of all of these LUNs. But because I've told Windows Failover Cluster Manager to run SQL 1 on server 1 and SQL 2 on server 2, Windows says, okay, I'm only going to take ownership of these LUNs that are allocated to SQL 1, and SQL 2 says, well, I'm only going to take ownership of these LUNs that are allocated to SQL 2, creating a balanced, in our term, this is our homegrown term, a balanced cluster, because you've got SQL 1 on server 1, SQL 2 on server 2. Now, if you just reboot server 2 and you don't think to move the group back over, what will happen is this guy will move over here, and server 1 will actually take ownership of these disks, and then all these databases and all these resources will be running on server 1 only, and it might not have enough hardware, compute, and RAM to handle that type of workload. So just real quick, I'll show you how that works in reality. So this particular set of databases is on a virtual instance. So this name -vs is for virtual server. Now, if I connect to another database engine on the same cluster, you notice I have the ability to connect to either of these two. These are completely separate things. So when I enumerate these databases, they are, even though this is named the same, it's completely different data. So, and I can expand the tables and prove that to you. So look at the tables here, now look at the tables here. A lot more. Yeah, it's completely different. It's a completely separate SQL installation, a completely separate SQL Server IP and name, and then a completely separate set of data.
Okay, so just to expand a little bit on that, what happens when you start dealing with your backups of those systems, like your failover backup? So like if something fails, you want to be able to have still access to that SQL 1 or SQL 2 database. Where's the backup for those databases living?
Well, the backup we write to a file share, and I can show you that real quick. So the full backup is written to the backup files are actually written to a file share, but I think what you're asking is where the data files are. But I'll show you both real quick, just so it.
What I'm also asking is in a sense of for trying to maintain quote unquote 100% uptime. If something fails, and so the user end doesn't see anything on their end, but in the background it's failed over to another server or another SQL database. So did you have that in place, and if so, how are you connecting it with this balance system?
So now I understand what you're asking. So this particular architecture here is slightly legacy. It's called failover cluster instance. So there is no guarantee. Well, it's very hard to get a 5 nines uptime with this, because if you look at this architecture, there's one huge single point of failure, and that's the storage layer.
Right.
So what you're talking about is SQL Server always on. In which case the data is replicated using the SQL Server always on technology, and the storage is duplicated. So if I have a 1 terabyte database on SQL 1 and I want that replicated in the always on configuration to server 2 or SQL 2, now I'm consuming 2 terabytes of a data footprint.
Right.
So I'm duplicating the data. That's a great configuration, and we have that also, but that's not this.
Okay.
Yeah. So on this, like when you reboot something or something goes down, even though it comes back up within minutes, it's still an outage.
Okay.
Now with always on, because the data is synchronously replicated between 2 completely different storage containers, when one of them fails, the application, if it's configured correctly, all those transactions in flight will actually fail over to the other instance and continue processing on the other instance.
Right.
in which case you can start giving those 5 nines uptime guarantee.
Okay.
With this configuration, I would not try to guarantee 5 nines.
Okay.
Because anytime there's a reboot, anytime there's a hardware hiccup, anytime that instance fails over, it's an application outage.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because there's too much load on the other node.
That and SQL Server actually reboots during the failover process.
Oh,
With
does it?
failover cluster instances, with always on, it doesn't. You have
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. So
I didn't realize
also
they did that with the
with
with
FCIs,
failover.
yep,
Okay.
failover cluster instances, it's literally a reboot.
Can you do a combination of both? Can you do
You absolutely
failover
can.
and always on?
You could always on your database that's on a failover cluster instance.
Oh, you can.
You can. So this, if I wanted to put this in an AAG, always on availability group, I could do that.
And then there would be another one coming out the other side.
So then what you'd have is you'd have this entire, let me do this in red. What you'd have to do is you'd have to duplicate this entire configuration. So you'd have to have 4 servers and 2 shared storage units.
Okay.
But the data would be replicated.
And then you could do always on failover.
Correct.
Scenario.
Yeah, you just-
That would be a better scenario than
It
what
would
you
have
have,
that's-
right?
but the cost factor is significant.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It always costs more
To do
to
cool
have
stuff.
Insurity.
Yeah, exactly.
Insurity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 nines.
It's not cheap. It's not
Yeah.
cheap.
A lot of IT groups, it's hard to explain that, like to the people actually signing the checks. Like, oh, you
Yep.
want 5 nines? Well, this is what it's going to cost you, and they're like, why do I need all that hardware? Well,
You have to protect yourself against a single point of failure.
yeah. If you want redundancy, you got to pay for it.
Well, it's just
So,
like airplanes. Airplanes the same way.
Yeah.
On F-16, it's quite redundant.
oh, I didn't know
Especially
that.
on the.
Yeah, because the what is it? All the flight control services are quite redundant. So if any one channel goes out, you got 3 other ones to depend on.
And those are not cheap, right?
Nope.
Isn't it the same thing on the F-22 and F-35?
I would assume so. I never worked those.
So-
It was on
That's
the 117.
right.
It was on the 117 and the F-16, but I don't know about anything beyond that. I'm I'm not young enough to know anymore.
I forgot you were in avionics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was.
I forgot about that. Okay. So the
Would the F-16s fly by wire? Sorry, side.
No, go for
They would fly by wire.
Yeah, they were first aircraft it was.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so the problem we were having is this particular, like this SQL instance would get moved over here, and then the users would complain that the database was slow and it was due to resource contention. And so for the life of us, we were like, why do they keep moving? Why do they keep ending up on one node? And then we finally figured out, oh, after the patching windows, the NOC, the Network Operations Center, isn't trained to move the group back to the other node, and therefore they don't know any better, so they're just rebooting the servers because that's what their playbook says to do, and we're ending up with these quote-unquote imbalanced clusters, as we call them. So I'm only going to show Gen 1 because Gen 2 is in work, but so Gen 1 of this was, okay, first thing we got to do is we have to inventory all of our systems. We have to figure out like what failover cluster instances we have in the environment, and which ones are legacy, because one other thing is when you create a failover cluster instance, you actually create a virtual computer object in Active Directory for that virtual name, virtual computer object. So one of the things we thought of is like, hey, what if we just query Active Directory and get a list of all of the failover cluster instances that match that are in this particular domain, which in this case it's gcu.edu. So if I just simply do a get cluster and I pass in the domain, it's going to give me all the failover cluster instances within that domain.
All that, so including the ones that's active and inactive, right?
Even the ones that are orphaned. Yes, sir. It's going to give me every virtual computer object that is a failover cluster instance.
Okay.
Yep.
And where's your import for that particular?
I didn't import.
Oh, it's in your module path then, isn't it?
Well, so you're absolutely right that I should have something at the beginning of the script that imports the failover cluster module, but I did it manually and it's not part of the script, but you're right, it should
Well,
be.
if it's in the module path, it would automatically find it.
That is correct.
It's
So,
supposed to
yeah.
find it.
So if I were to do this, it might take it, but yeah, so as you can see, it
Yeah.
actually,
Came back with results.
the module is there, but you're right, I manually imported it. So yeah, that's one thing that we should improve on Gen 2 is we should put the check to see if it's there. If not, import the failover cluster module.
Yeah, it's usually, I've been bit by that a lot of times.
And we have to. Actually, Donnie and I were just talking about that today. And yes, you're right. Good catch. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically passing the SQL query in that says I'm checking to see if this table exists. It's called cluster response log. And if the table does not exist, it executes the create table statement here and adds the constraints to the table.
Cool.
Yeah. So then I bring in my, .NET assemblies for SQL Server SMO because I'm going to create a connection, SQL Server object connection.
Yeah.
Connection equals, and then the destination SQL instance. It's always the same, but it's our central management server, which is this. And actually, that might.
Oh, that's the one that you're using that shows all your databases and whatnot? Is that what you're doing?
So this particular one right here is just holding the table called cluster response log, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through everything that got inserted to that table and see if it's alive.
Okay.
Because
doesn't SQL have like one SQL server that knows about everything else and you can
This is the
configure it?
central management server. So
That's
yes,
what it's called, the central management server?
And
Okay.
then yes, you're correct on both of those answers both of those are correct assumptions right here. So every SQL server in the environment, in the production environment, gets registered into this
Okay.
CMS, and so we can manage them all.
And so what you're doing is doing an SMO object to attach to that and find the data that you want.
No, I'm not. So I'm just using this because it's our central management server, but I am not using SMO for that. What I'm doing here is I'm querying Active Directory for everything that's a failover cluster, and I'm logging it to a table, and then I'm going to loop through that every record in that table and check to see if I can connect to it.
So then the ones that are orphaned then, do they not show up in SQL in your management server?
They don't because they were never registered.
Ah, okay.
Because the central.
That's why you're doing that. Okay.
Right. So
I was trying to figure out what the idea was. Okay.
just to give you the backstory, so the central management server that I'm using right now was created after we inherited all these failover cluster instances.
Ah, gotcha. And so they haven't been registered yet at all then?
Well, a lot of them have now, but there are several that have been decommissioned that are basically orphaned, what I call VCOs, virtual computer objects in Active Directory, that unless we make the AD team aware of it, they'll never clean it out because they don't know any better. They're not just going to go delete something from AD.
Unless they're told to do it.
Right. So we tell them, hey,
sense.
we tried to ping this, it doesn't respond. We've tried to ping it for 5 days and got no response. Can you check it out? And they'll usually come back and say, you know what, that's part of this decommissioned system. We're going to go ahead and remove that VCO from AD.
Cool.
So great stuff. I love talking about SQL Server. So I actually think I might have this wrong. Yeah, so this should be this actually. And I just caught another error. So just, I'm going to just put myself out there and show my weakness. But so I started just PowerShelling just because I knew we had a bunch of tasks that need to be automated.
Mm-hmm.
And so with a lot of my scripts that are Gen 1, you'll notice I do stupid things like this, which is really bad. Because what am I doing, Tom? I'm double instantiating a string or something like that. Because it's already a string object when it's passed in as the variable, and then by me wrapping it in double quotes, I'm doing it twice, right?
Well, it's just all it's doing is if there were space, or let's see, it's doing what they call it's literal when it's single quotes.
That's right.
And it's command line expansion when it does it when you put it in double quotes. So if you want an actual string, then you do it that way. The thing that you get in trouble with is if you do that and it's actually a nested object, you'll get an object item in there more often than not.
Yeah, which is why I should have never done that. But
you just have to test for it to see if it's an object.
And I didn't know any better, and I see it here too, this error.
It's okay, that's the way you learn.
Yeah.
You learn.
So
is there a specific reason why you have instance misspelled when you have a $sign value, or is that so you have server instance?
it's not spelled instance. That's not how you spell instance. It's not instance.
It's a new type of instance. It's ace instance.
I also have a learning disability, so Thank you for pointing that out for everyone to see. No, that's fine. I don't
wasn't
mind.
trying to do that. I was trying to understand
No.
if you were specifically changing the variable,
Nope.
like because of a syntax or something.
Nope. It was simply my my
It's
bad.
called you
style.
type too fast and you get it wrong, so you end up using the same one everywhere.
That's exactly it. So I got
Doesn't
it
the code
wrong.
normally tell you?
Well, at least it's named the same.
At least it's
Yeah.
consistent. Let's see here. So let me just make sure I paste that and then.
You should be able to do Control H.
Everywhere.
You should be able to do
Oh.
Control H.
Okay, Control H. Okay, well, yeah, okay. I think I'm good though. I think it's misspelled everywhere actually. So, okay, good call. So yeah, so I'm basically creating a SQL Server connection object, and then I'm passing in the query that I showed you above to check if the table exists. If not, it creates it. And then I basically loop through every name in the
The
cluster.
table exists for,
Oh, so this is another fun thing that we
what's
found
the
out.
table?
So this is the table right here, cluster log connection,
Okay.
cluster connection logs, cluster response logs. So the reason I checked for the table existing, I had somebody delete the table. So we have a job that runs every night that does this. And one day it failed, and it failed because it couldn't find the object. And so I went to look and query the table, and it was gone. So that's when I added the if exists, if not exists, create statement to this because,
Oh, I see. Okay.
yeah, so if it doesn't exist, create the table because I can't write to a table that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, when you're dealing, I think when we're dealing with, when we're acquiring and we're dealing with multiple chefs in the kitchen, that stuff can
Can you
happen.
test everything?
That stuff can happen, and it happened to me, and it bit me, so that's why I did that. So yeah, so this basically loops through all the names in cluster list, which you can see cluster list is this down here, which we queried from Active Directory,
Right.
and it does a test connection with a count of 2 because I wanted to do something more than 1 just in case there was just a network blip, but I didn't want to do 4 because that would take a little bit longer, and then it inserts it into the cluster response log, and it also inserts the connection test result. So if it was true or false, if it responded or not, I log that in the table. And then this is basically,
That's an object you're logging. Does a test connection give you like name, FQDN, couple, I can't remember. I thought maybe I'm confusing it with
Maybe.
resolve DNS. Does resolve DNS give you A and a C name back? I was just curious.
well, I will tell you it gives me a true or false back. Well, no, okay, no, because here I'm
No,
creating.
that's because of the quiet switch. Is what
Oh,
does it.
okay, yeah,
Quiet,
yeah.
Quiet does it.
Okay, yep.
You're right.
Well, I mean, I literally was just trial and error. I mean, you know way more about this syntax than I do, but yeah, so I'm just setting this variable equal to whatever that is, and like you said, because I pass it to quiet, it just gives me a true or false.
Yep, exactly.
Um,
Man, I should have used that today. I forgot about that switch.
here
I was using that today. The test connection. I forgot about quiet.
again, I have those that double instantiation, which is bad.
If it works, or if it ain't broke, why fix it?
Yeah, true.
Sometimes it's a lifesaver too.
Okay, really? Because it.
It has caused me issues in the past when something's shown up differently than expected.
Okay, yeah. So basically what I'm doing is I'm building the query here for each, and I'm passing in the name and then the result of the connection.
Yeah, so you loop through and do it for each one of them.
Yep, for each one of these 80
Yeah.
or however many there are here,
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
and it logs it
Then
to
how do you give yourself output that it actually added it, or does it show you when you do that insert? Does it give you a return so that it
let's see.
spits it back out? Do you remember?
Let's see. I don't typically give myself output on the PowerShell because I'm more of a SQL person. I tend to just go check the database to see if the values are there.
Okay.
Not saying that's good, just saying that's what I've been doing. So yeah, it looks like it is not going to give that to me, but if I'm to run this query,
Oh, then you'll see the results
you'll
in the
see
table.
stuff starting to show up. So it's 1906. Yeah, no, 1819, that would have been 619. So you're seeing this stuff, and you're seeing some of this stuff. Like link, we don't have link anymore. That's an orphaned record, and it shows a cluster response of false.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it's still running. So it'll take, again, we run this every night. I think it takes 5 minutes to run, but that's fine. I mean, and it might give you some output here in the end, but yeah, as you can see, as it's running, see, this one responded, this one did not. So this one's a legacy one that we just replaced this. So
Are you having SQL put the timestamp in there, or are you
I
putting
am.
it in the query?
nope, it's so good question. Let me show you where that is.
Is it actually in a stored proc or something?
Even better, it's a default. Let me show you real quick. It's a constraint on the column.
Oh,
So,
really? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So what I do is I add a constraint to the column saying if no value is passed in, then
Add the
take the value of get date and insert it, and that is
cool.
done. Yep.
cool.
So let's see.
That's much easier than passing it with get date.
It is. So here we go. Add constraint, constraint name, and then get date is the SQL thing for daytime. For this column for daytime inserted.
Cool.
So yeah, the easy way to do that, just to show everybody, the really easy way to do that is you just, if you're building a new table in the GUI, new table, and you want to call this date inserted date time, you just go down here and you say default value or binding, and you just say get date. And then every time you insert a row, if you pass it nothing, it'll just automatically put the value of get date.
Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty. SQL does a pretty good job, I think. So, not done yet, or still running? Oh, it's still running. So, yeah, like I said, this will take. This could take a good 5 minutes. Version 2. So Caleb, one of the guys that you talked to, he showed us something last week on how to execute all of these in parallel using namespaces, or is it namespaces? Yeah.
Whole tasks.
Wait.
Run spaces.
Run spaces.
Or
Sorry.
jobs.
Or job. Yeah. Runs. Well, would jobs work for this, or
PS jobs would work with the, so PS jobs will create run spaces and do it in parallel.
That's right.
And then you can also do workflows as well, but PS jobs are just easier to manage than workflows.
PS jobs and run spaces. So yeah, version 2, we will be doing all this in parallel with run spaces. That way each one can go and do its thing right to the table and
Different
I don't know.
threads, yeah.
Yeah. So let's see if it finished. So
I'd be interested in that when you get it working with the run space.
Yeah.
Because I haven't had the opportunity to do that much with run spaces.
So if we get time, I'll also show you one of the other things that I'm working on that we'll use PowerShell workflows for. So PowerShell workflows, while we're waiting, I'll just go ahead and quickly give a bite. The way I understand it is it allows me to sequentially do tasks, and if there's a failure in the middle of that chain, it can start at, say, step 3 if it failed on step 3 versus step 1.
Mm-hmm.
So where that's really, oh no, you don't?
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, so where it's really important in my world is if I'm using PowerShell to go out and do some things and prep a server and then restore a 1 terabyte database, if it restored that 1 terabyte database but then failed inserting 10 records to a table, I don't want to restore a terabyte of data and wait another hour. I just want to reinsert the 10 records. So that's where I understand that workflow is to really add value. But I'd be more than happy once I get that working to demo that as well.
Okay.
So it did complete, Tom, and there is no output.
So are you having somebody run this, or this is just running?
Let me show you. So this is actually running as a SQL agent job. So
Oh,
as
I
you're
see. So
familiar-
you don't really have anybody in your NOC or something like that that's running it then?
Not this. So this is just what we're doing here is we're inventorying all the virtual computer objects and
Looking
Active
for
Directory.
problems, basically.
Yep, reconnaissance. So where is it here? DBA. Find non-responders. So this SQL agent job is like what you would have in cron. shoe,
Yeah.
where we can just attach a schedule to it. And so this is the run posh. So this is we just pass it the file and tell it to run that file. And we just attach a schedule to it and say, hey, every 1 hour between these times, run this.
Gotcha.
Because basically what we're trying to test for is we want to see that something didn't respond like 5 or 10 times before we alert on it. Because it could have just been down for that hour. There could have been a VLAN hiccup in that segment, or who knows. So we just want to test for that and make sure that we're getting a good non-response, like 5 to 10 times before we let somebody else know about it. So that job runs every day. So now I have a good list of potential virtual computer objects that are tagged with the attribute of a failover cluster instance. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through the list of FCIs that actually gave me a response. So again, what I do is I specify my central management server instance, which is this, and then I'm saying, okay, and I'll just show you this query in a little bit easier way to read. So basically what I'm saying here, if you guys can see that, is I'm saying give me all the distinct cluster names from my cluster response log table where the cluster response was true and it was within the last 48 hours, and it has the first letter of P because then I know it's production. And then I order by the cluster names. So if I execute that, it's going to give me a distinct list of all my production failover SQL Server cluster instances. Cool. So I pass that to a variable. So again, same cookie cutter stuff here, creating the connection object. And then I just throw a simple try catch, and I'm basically setting this variable all cluster groups equal to the results of that query that I just showed you in the other window.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, my understanding is this automatically creates an array for me. With PowerShell, I don't have to do anything else, which is really cool. I basically just say, if I pass it all those different values, it automatically knows to create an array. So that's really awesome. I then say, okay, and this is maybe not the most elegant way to do it, but what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, I want to do all this filtering on all the different cluster resources. So if I were to do a get cluster group for just a particular cluster name, I would return a lot of things that I don't want. Like, for example, when I look in failover cluster manager and I look at the resources, like I don't care about the disk drive. That doesn't matter to me. All I really care about is that 2 of these virtual names are running on the same physical server. So I'm throwing away all the stuff I don't want by saying, well, okay, the name has to be like DB because all of our production failover cluster instances either have the name DB or SQL in them. So I'm saying, hey, either of these 2 conditions, I'm good, and I don't want any of these other conditions in my list because I don't care about those. Like if the file share is running on the same physical server as the SQL instance, that's okay. If the Microsoft Distributed Transaction Coordinator, aka MSDC, is running on the same physical server, that's okay. Again, very lightweight things, so that's cool. And then I'm just doing a select object of name and owner node so I can group them and get a count of anything greater than 1. Because if I get a count of greater than 1 on the same name, I know I have 2 virtual instances running on the same physical server, and that needs to be balanced out. Then I'm just doing a format list. In PowerShell to say, okay, there's 2 of you SQL instances. Well, let me just run this. And so this is, I'm just going to call the actual file that I just showed you through the console, because I don't know why, but it works better. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but when I run it, so I'm just going to run it here. So while that's running, so basically what will happen is this will go through and it's going to go through that.
Holy cow, that's your file name?
I know, right? I'm a rookie, man.
It's got lots of spaces in
That's
it.
the file name?
Wow, that's the first time I've ever seen with that descriptive.
Well, what I'm doing is I loop through cluster list for nodes owning more than 1 SQL instance.
Yeah, it's all good.
.ps1.
It's all good,
I'm not saying
man.
description's not bad.
Just I've never seen one that long. I'm not throwing stones.
No. Hey, man, please do, because like I was telling you when I met you last year, we're learning. we're just trying to adopt automation, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're fine with that. So throw all the stones you want and beat us up. We're good with
But
that.
you know what though, with that name, someone can say I accidentally picked the wrong one. It's not like it's like 234 XYZ. That's the name of the code. It's like no, that's the one.
Well,
That's the one
but
I
can you
need.
imagine being the operator on the
Well, that's
on
what
the
tab
computer?
completion's all
Oh,
about.
dang! I didn't type it in right, and not knowing tab completion. That's where my brain was.
No?
Yeah. I'm thinking back to the good old DOS days where you only had 8 characters.
Right.
I'm like, no.
It would have been LTCLFNO. .ps1. This is kind of fun because we had a guy in our group today install some software on one of the failover clusters and reboot one of the nodes. And as you can see, like that person didn't rebalance the cluster.
Yeah,
Because
who
it's
that
showing
might
up
be.
here in the list. So yeah, basically what I'm getting here is I'm saying, okay, here's the physical server. It's running 2 virtual SQL instances, which can't be good, and here are the names of the SQL instances. So what that tells the NOC to do is they'll just go ahead and connect to this server. They'll RDP into it, and then they'll just use the failover cluster manager to move the group. Again, version 2 of this, what we'll do is we'll look at that, and then we'll use the move-cluster group commandlet to actually move one of the groups to the other node.
Have you, just out of curiosity, have you looked at any of what you're doing here actually inside the SQL provider?
No, I didn't. And the reason I didn't do that is because I needed to query out to AD. But should I do that? Should I look inside?
You could. I mean, you might find it easier to find things in there because you can
Okay.
do like, you can do get child item and it'll get you like all the SQL databases on a given instance and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's actually pretty nice
Okay.
for lots of different things. You can get like your security information, stuff like that.
Really? Okay. We'll have to look at that.
It's you if you have what is it? Just do get -ps drive. It might be listed in there already. It might already be loaded. Yeah, it is loaded. See SQL Server right there.
Mm-hmm.
Just do CD SQL Server. Colon.
Oh, so you do what? CD colon.
No, just CD.
Just CD.
Space SQL Server. Just like you see in the list. Colon. Now hit enter. Now do dir. See, and then you have all the same stuff that when you load the SQL module for the whatever SQL AS I think is what it's called, it'll put this provider in there for you, and you can get to a lot of things for that particular database. And there's you can switch between database servers and all that kind of stuff. It's really
Okay.
handy.
So I could just do like a connect colon and then connect to a different SQL
I
instance.
think so. You'll have to
Okay,
look at it. I
got
can't remember anymore.
So how do I get out of here?
Just C colon.
CD.
Okay. So it's just like changing. Okay, got it.
It presents everything like a file system.
Okay, so let
That's
me.
what a provider's all about.
Gotcha.
So think of everything like you do in the Linux world
Okay,
as a file system, all the devices and everything on there. This is equivalent to it with the providers.
cool.
But there are each provider has different ways of doing things, so they don't all work the same. So you have to be like the one for IAS is really different,
Okay.
and the one for SQL Server can be different too on some things.
Okay, so can you set the configuration stuff with the IIS one? Can you?
Oh yeah,
Okay, that's really cool. So you can.
you just have to import the web administration module,
Got it. Okay.
and then it makes it real easy because you can do just typical dir commands or get item if you want, whichever one you're
Sure.
comfortable with.
Nested, yeah.
And
Okay.
you can recurse it and it'll automatically build an object with all those items in it for you.
So that's pretty slick because then I could have one kind of master configuration script for all web servers in a particular farm.
Yeah, you might be able to get to some of the clustering in there too. I can't remember.
Here's why I think you can't. And again, I don't know, but here's what I think. So this is a Windows level service right here. SQL Server is unaware that it's actually clustered. You see what I'm saying? Like, so from the SQL Server's point of view, he's like, hey, I'm sitting on top of some resources. This is awesome. But he doesn't know that they're actually shared between two Windows nodes.
Yeah, it's still at the LUN level, right?
Right. So that's why I was worried that like that, I was like, well, that's a Windows thing. So the kind of mental framework that we've been going off of for our automation guidelines is if it's a Windows thing, use PowerShell. If it's a SQL Server thing, use TSQL. Hence the reason I'm passing in these TSQL queries, as you know, because it's like I'm not going to use PowerShell to manage things that TSQL can do natively for SQL Server, and I'm not going to try to use SQL Server to try to do things that Windows can do and PowerShell can do
Makes
natively
sense.
for Windows.
That's what works for you. Makes sense.
Because I've had issues, so you can do it in SQL Server. You can turn on these extended store procedures and you can do like an XP command shell and get to a DOS prompt from within the SQL Server query analyzer here, or the SQL Server Management Studio. But to me, I'm like, now you're outside of your lane. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you're going to do SQL Server stuff, use TSQL. If you're going to do OS level stuff, for us, it's use PowerShell. So yeah, so the NOC would take this list and they would basically RDP into this server, and you know, let me see. So this one here is our SQL Management Physical Server. So if I did a host name, I would be on 2001 right now. So let's see, host. Yeah, so I'm on this server. So 2002 in this list. This is actually the second node in that cluster. So I think, so Gen 2 of the script, I think I can do something like, oh, what's the PowerShell command for move cluster? Let's see here, I think it's move cluster. Move cluster group. So I think what I can do is move cluster group. And I think I can literally just give it this name of the one I want to move. So for this one, I want to do this. So this is the name of that resource. And so just real quick to kind of give an overview. So for that role, this role right here, the virtual name is pSQL MG01-BS. So this is the actual VIP that somebody on the network would connect to, an application would connect to if they're trying to access data within this SQL instance. So it should, if I just do that with the name, it should move all of these resources over to the other node. So let's just see, because you always want to test in prod. Let's just see what happens if I do that.
You don't have to have change data.
Probably should. See, and it's moving all of these resources for me.
Nice.
Yeah. So again, Gen 2, I didn't have it ready to demo tonight. There we go. Yep. But again, what I love about PowerShell, one line of code, I mean, literally one command, and it did all of those things for me. So now if I were to rerun that imbalance cluster report, that one wouldn't show up on the list. Where's that file name? How can you miss it? Why didn't it run it? Oh, I see why. Yeah, it's not right there.
Well, you know what you could do is push and pop D. You know about push and pop D?
Uh-uh.
So let's say you're in your script and you're in a particular directory and you want to change directory somewhere else and you want to come back. Just issue push D and it'll put your current directory on the stack.
Oh, nice.
And then you change directory, do whatever you want to do, and then issue pop D and it'll put you right back where you started.
Nice.
I like that.
It's actually set location and push location. But I
Yeah.
like push and pop D. They're easy to remember.
Push and plop were Linux names.
So that tab complete, just just to, you know, so loop,
Yep.
tab, bam.
Damn.
There we go.
Like going to be our new standard.
Well,
No.
imagine putting that in a task scheduler or something.
Yeah.
And not getting a spell right. Or trying to pass it with a, you ever tried to pass something to PowerShell exe before it actually loads? It's a pain in the neck. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I have.
Oh my goodness. It takes forever to get that syntax right.
So luckily for us, so again, now we see it did not show up on the list because it's a perfectly balanced cluster. Because if we look at the failover cluster manager and we look at the nodes, so our nodes are 2001 and 2002, as we can see, and the roles, this particular SQL Server instance is on 2002, and this particular SQL Server instance is on 2001.
Nice.
So again, Gen 2 will be, us going through, like writing out a flowchart of the decision tree and then just coding that in PowerShell and then using that move cluster group to rebalance them after a patching window. And then Donnie's working on actually presenting some of those options as buttons on a web page.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. So they can just,
Pass this side.
you'll get past it, man.
Actually.
You'll get past it by Thursday, I'm confident. Because we're demoing it to the CTO.
Sounds more like, I'm confident you'll do it or you're out.
No. I told Kathy it was great, and I told her it would be ready by Thursday. No pressure, man.
I haven't slept all week.
I'm kidding, man. I'm kidding. You'll get past it.
There's a coffee shop on the way home somewhere, I'm sure.
Just going to need an IV drip of coffee. Like, Donnie, you've been wearing the same shirt for 3 days. I've been left for 3 days.
I got you a cotton sleeping bag.
Just so long as they don't take your red stapler, right?
I swear, I'm going to bring this place down.
Oh, that's great. If you guys want, I can show you the other thing that would be, in my opinion, a great candidate for PowerShell workflows. Or if you want, we can just call it a day and go drink beer. It's totally up to you guys. Beer's on me, Oliver.
I'm good with being done.
Okay,
If everybody else
I'm
is.
fine with it. I'm just gonna stop sharing.
Just want to see if we can take a crack at this one issue.
Yeah.
The module. Sure.
Are we not live anymore?
We're still live. You
I
want to
want
talk
to
to
see
anybody?
if we could possibly even compile it
All right. Goodbye.
from
Thank you for joining.
PowerShell
Good night.
into an exe and then just have PowerShell call that. That way we don't
I hope
have to
that
worry about
didn't-
the module thing.
What I stated
Say what?
at the beginning didn't get put in the
No, it
meeting.
didn't.
Some people have created tools where you can convert PS1 files into exe.
Yeah, PS to EXE, yeah. I have
So
a buddy
I'm
that-
thinking maybe if we get that script and convert it to an exe, all the code dependencies will be written within that exe, so I won't have to worry about trying to import a module that this run space doesn't.
So when you did it gave you the module path, right?
So
Why don't
even
you
if
just-
I specify
I'm gonna steal this
the
from you.
literal path to the
Here, share your screen,
PS1,
Donnie. So
Here, I'll just put it up on the screen so you can show
Yeah,
me.
good luck.
Where the
Unplug
hell?
that. Unplug that.
What the hell you got here, bro?
Ah,
I'm not thinking very straight.
It was a hot mess.
You ain't lying about that.
You may have to use a DP converter. Someone using HDMI has issues.
you gotta love this,
Oh,
this technology.
Yeah, my computer sucks.
Hey, there we go.
Okay, so when you were running that, what's your module path? Did it come back with your module path?
Yeah, I was testing out some stuff.
Oh, we're still
The
streaming.